Hey guys, welcome to Conversations. My name is John Thomas. I'm here with my friend Kobi Ferguson, and we're going to be talking a little bit about Israel, and I know that's of interest to some of you. So Kobi, first, just tell me the name of your ministry and a little bit about what you're doing in Israel.
Well, the name of our ministry is Yeshua Israel, and my wife was born and raised in the land. I moved there. She likes to say I'm an import, but my first trip there to minister was in 1998. So it's literally been 20 years now, ministry in the land. We formed our ministry in the year 2000. I call it Yeshua Israel, Yeshua being salvation, also the Hebraicized name of the Hebrew name for Jesus.
Yeah.
And Israel, of course, is clear what that is. So it's not just the name of our ministry. It's really the vision of what we want to see. We want to see Israel saved. We want to see Romans 11:26. Kol Yisrael Yevasha, all of Israel shall be saved. And really two primary things that we began to identify over years that we felt were extremely lacking in the land and something that we could do to bring more of in the land was one in the area of worship music. We're singers, musicians, songwriters in our family, in our team, and our ministry team. So we gather musicians and Israeli psalmists, songwriters, artists all over the land. We formed what we call the Israeli Fellowship of Artists. You can see it on Facebook and different things. We started basically a national kind of gathering and mentoring and just a way to try to facilitate and release these people in their destiny if there's any way we can help them. And so really creating a massive amount of Israeli worship, so with different styles, but also in the language of Hebrew. We began to see there was a huge lack of this. So we wanted to see more of it, not just for the believers, but of course for the believers. But we also began to see that music is a way to reach people who are a little bit more open, other artists, other musicians. And we've even had feedback from religious Jews who normally we thought, hey, are going to be very obstinate. They've actually reached out and said, this music's actually very interesting to us because of the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We try to lift him so high and in Hebrew. So they're very interested in that. And the other big, huge direction, focus on our ministry is what we call the Israel Family Initiative. So we have the Israel Worship Initiative and the Israel Family Initiative. And we began to see all the different things happening in Israel and amazing ministries to the land. We began to see families falling through the cracks. Some of the practical needs, some of the educational, even medical needs of families just weren't being met. And congregations are strapped. We're in a wartime economy. So everything's very difficult.
Wow, that's good. And you did your wife actually did a coloring book on that, right?
We actually did. When we're talking about family, we began to see some of the things we were learning as we have 5 children, and it's a process of learning how to lead your family. And we began to connect with people all over the world. Once you start really going in the direction of valuing family, you begin to see God will draw you people from all over the world to you to help you and for you to help them. And we began to see really this was what God promised to Abraham. And when he gave him the word that I will bring a son to you. Yeah. But he told him, Abraham, this is the reason I've chosen you. Genesis 18:19.
Yes.
I've chosen you, it says in Hebrew, for this cause, that you will train your children in the ways of the Lord to do righteousness and justice. And so we began to create a training manual is really what it is. It's a practical guide for family discipleship. And we call it Color Me Family. And so in this book, Color Me Family, my wife had the idea of a coloring book. I said, coloring book? You want our first book to be a coloring book? She's like, trust me, it'll be okay. And I had no idea of the huge trend of adult coloring books. So what we have is not necessarily a child's coloring book or an adult's coloring book. It's really both or either or. It can be for children but the adults need to read the material. And it's basically going through our take on the Lord showing us about Israel and how Israel's called to be a light to the nations was first seen in the context of family.
Yes.
And I think that around the world, people are really kind of striving to get some clues of how do we train our families?
Yeah.
How do we make disciples out of our own children? Sometimes people anybody in ministry, this is really for you.
Yes.
Because a lot of people will focus on everybody else, but their own children don't get discipled. They have all these other disciples. And I said, did you include your children in that number of disciples? If not, we're in trouble.
Right.
So we've created something that we hope will help people. There's some amazing content that my wife is really a brilliant writer. God's really gifted her. And she put a lot of the things that we've been teaching and preaching over the years to one side of the book, and the other side is the practical example. We had a young lady living with us who's a brilliant illustrator. And she said, after living with you guys, I want to draw some of the things I'm seeing and put it on paper. Wow. And so she really worked together with us as a part of our family. And actually, there's a chapter in there called Adopt a Single. And she basically said this chapter is about me and the drawing of how we brought her into the family out of a difficult situation to help her be a part. And now she's giving back and hopefully has helped us give something that will hopefully touch and inspire. And we are, as family, we need tools. Sometimes we just need little tips here and there. And so hopefully this can be that for somebody.
That's awesome. Great. Well, glad to have you with us today.
Hey, it's wonderful to be here.
Thanks. When I'd first known the Lord, and I'd never heard any teaching about Messianic, Messianic Judaism, Messianic Christians, that whole thing, I'd never heard of it. But I'd read the Bible through a couple times, and I'm a couple years into being a believer, and get a phone call, and it's a survey, and they're asking, are there any Jews in the household? I had no idea how to answer that question because having read the Bible, I'm like, well, I mean, I would guess that I'm a Jew, because in my mind, what that meant is I wasn't thinking about a race of people. I was thinking about a religion. And to me, Christianity is Judaism. Judaism is Christianity. It's two different ways of looking at it. One looking towards the cross, one looking back at the cross. And understanding that. And I know that that's very simplified, and that doesn't perceive what I believe now, but that was my thought. So I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, how would you what sect of Christianity or Judaism? They named off like 4 or 5 different ones. And they said something about Messianic Jews. And I'm like, I think that's right. Because I believe in the Messiah. And, I'm sure the person on the other end of the phone is like, this guy's weird. He has no idea what he's talking about. Is he just messing up our survey? But I mean, I genuinely didn't know how to answer that question, because when I think about my faith, I think about the God who met with Noah, and I think about the God who met with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And I think about the God that met Moses.
This is a Jewish thing.
It is a Jewish thing. And I take a look at the promise to Abraham. Abraham, I'm going to bless you so that you will be a blessing to all the nations. And I read in Jeremiah where he's talking about, I'm going to bring, it's not just the Jews, it's not just Israel, but it's all the nations that are going to come. Isaiah 2 says, I'm going to bring all of the nations to come to this mountain to learn my ways. And Zechariah, where there comes a point where all the nations of the world, in whatever that period of time where Jesus is ruling on the earth, where they find a Jew and they grab all of them, please take us, tell us, what is this God? What is this faith that you have? Because we need to understand it.
Yeah, so I think we're in an interesting time in history. I think a few years ago, I was reading in Time magazine, some of the biggest trends. It's quite a few years ago now, but they said the top 10 trends that will change human history. They'll change the way we live. That'll change everything. And one of them was the economy shifting also to Asia, not just being in the West, and healthcare. They had a lot of innovative concepts there that were trending, basically. And one of them, and this is, totally secular. These are people that just did research over the course of a year. So we're going to look at all aspects of society. One of the things they determined was the understanding of the Jewishness of Jesus was one of the biggest trends they saw in humanity that would shift the way people thought. and the way people did things. Now, they went to seminaries and really kind of high-level places that are not necessarily known for being charismatic or open to certain. They went to your mainstream, very conservative seminaries that a lot of people would know about, and that's what they began to see. And they began to interview people. And I know in my travel, I live in Israel. I live in Jerusalem with my wife, who was born and raised in Israel, and my 5 children also born and raised in Israel. And so as I travel just maybe once or twice a year to the U.S. and other places and share, I begin to notice, especially over the last 10 years and really over the last 5 years, just a growing number of what we would call Hebrew roots people, Jewish roots. There's different names, Messianic congregations that are just popping up. Just coming up all over the place. And it's a growing movement. Now, some of them I think are rooted and have a great dynamic. And I think some are kind of wackoing out to lunch.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, Jewish superstition.
Sorry if I'm offending somebody out there with that. Yeah, it's this mystical kind of concept that, of some of the things you just mentioned. And I think it's because they haven't really thought things through. And they don't really understand the covenants. And my father-in-law is an amazing teacher on the covenants, and he's really taught me to really think it through about, okay, so we have the Abrahamic Covenant, basically was starting with a man named Abraham, and that would continue to be a lineage through which Messiah would come from. So basically it's the beginning of the Jewish race of people. So it's an actual lineage with DNA of people that belong to this group of people. But it's also something that we see the nations, so Gentiles, and so it's not a dirty word. In Hebrew, it's just the goyim. You have the nations and you have the Jews. I talked to one scholar the other day, and he said, look, really in Scripture, there's just 2 races of people. I know people, also, obviously it mentions other groups, but not just about nationality, but when it talks about race, there's the Jews and Gentiles. They kind of lumps everybody else, whether white, black, yellow, white, they're precious in his sight. That's all the Gentiles, the nations, and the Jewish people. So it's an actual lineage, which is very important to note, because if not, then we lose context of why Jesus even came, Yeshua, we call him in Hebrew, to a Jewish people in the land of Israel. So I think when Christians, especially now, there's this kind of flux of people understanding, I think as you came to, hey, this is more of a Jewish thing. Actually, the term Christianity was kind of a later thought. Yeah. They were called followers of the way, or even these Jewish believers. And the concept of this greasy one, Mashiach, means anointed with oil. That was confusing to people. They didn't understand what people were talking about in the first centuries. So the term Christianity kind of developed later. And I know a lot of people that are Christians. They're Gentiles who love the Lord, they've received Jesus, they follow him. They say, I don't really kind of embrace this term Christianity. I don't really find an affinity with it. Some people think it's an amazing thing, but really, Yeshua, Jesus, didn't die to create another religion called Christianity. That's not what this whole thing's about. So the confusion comes with not understanding there were Gentiles that joined into the Jewish religion, but they were never considered, as part of the DNA of the people. And because they wanted to be able to keep that lineage going from generation to generation. So you had a covenant that started through Abraham that was ratified by circumcision. There's actually a mark of the covenant. There's actually certain things. Now, the Mosaic covenant's a totally different thing. It's a whole other conversation, probably. Yeah. But then you have a new covenant that was promised. And this is what's exciting, because this new covenant is what will bring in the entire world to be grafted in. So if you take a plant and you graft, we actually have one in our backyard. It's a my wife's going to get mad if I don't get this right, but it's like, it's some kind of like, it's like a lemon tree it's a berry tree, and they grafted in some kind of Syrian berry that grows only in Syria. And this guy grafted it in. He said, hey, let's see if it takes, it'll be this awesome kind of other fruit that's growing. So it's completely different fruit. It tastes different. looks different, but it's grafted in to this big bush that we have that has a completely different looking, completely different kind of berry.
Mm.
And so it's pretty fascinating. I said, wow, I've never really seen a graft in real life like this, just read about it. So, but that's exactly what the Lord is. Look, I'm going to take these people that don't really have anything. They're the Gentiles. They're not a part of this covenant that I promised with the nation of Israel. He told Israel, look, I'm going to give you a new covenant. All these things that were before, they don't go away. So we don't just throw away the law. I'm going to throw away the Old Testament. Do you know that's completely offensive to the Jewish people? Right. When even the phrase Old Testament, because it makes them feel like, you got the old thing. Us Christians, we have the New Testament. You have the old one. We have the new one. So that's kind of the concept.
That attitude is so wrong.
But it's very pervasive.
Oh, it is.
And a lot of, especially Reformed thinking, and it's pervasive throughout Christianity. But that's why I think these researchers said, hey, one of the big trends we're seeing, and we're kind of going to be in this flux, I think, for a few years of people trying to figure this out, find this out. I think you're going to have a lot of these kind of, like, as you know, I affectionately called them, kind of these wacko groups. But I go and speak sometimes in these congregations and these people. And if we can get along with each other and they can bear with me, one of the things I make sure to tell them, if you're not Jewish, embrace that. Because it's all about identity. I think people in this day and age are suffering from a lack of identity. And they're not secure in their identity. There's a lot of insecurities. There's a lot of issues, and male, female, black, white, Jew, Gentile. God has put distinctions and boundaries for a purpose. Yeah. And a part of the purpose of grafting the Gentiles in was because he knew that for the most part, the world would receive Jesus in comparison to the Jews in the first century. For the most part, there was always a contingency, but for the most part, they rejected him.
Yep.
But the Lord knew, okay, but this gospel, when I graft in the Gentiles, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I don't know how many percentage points, but it's 900% or 1,000 times more. What would the numbers be? Some of you good at math can tell me. You deal with 8 million Jews, and around the world, more than that, maybe 15 million in the entire population. And what is the world population now?
Pushing 7 billion.
Pushing 7 billion, 8 billion. So you're talking about
1 to 2% maybe.
So you're talking about a massive amount. So that's what we're talking about. And I know it's less than the time of the Lord.
0.1 or 0.2%.
0.1, 0.2%. So you have this small group of people. How are they going to reach the whole world?
Well, that was in the original promise to Abraham, right? I'm going to bless you so that you will be a blessing to all the nations.
To all the nations.
But what I'm doing for you, it is for you, but it is not just for you.
And he said he called Israel to be a light to the nations.
A light to the nations. And, and Jesus. So I'm talking to you, but I have another flock. You don't even understand.
That's right.
And they're also going to be a part, and there will be one flock.
And they scratched their head. And what's so funny is in the book of Acts, they said, we need to have a conference and determine, can Gentiles even get saved?
Right.
And now we've come so far full circle to say, can Jews even really get saved?
I know.
I remember my mother-in-law thinking that. She said it really kind of opened her eyes when she began to see a lot of different people from different backgrounds get born again that they never thought was possible, from certain kind of backgrounds of Christianity that were they're considered kind of just in name only, Christian in name only. And then she started thinking, okay, well, if a Catholic or this Orthodox background or this background can actually become born again and filled with the Spirit in the way we know. And of course, we know many from that background. We know that now, but you have to realize for many, many years, these different denominations and these different thoughts, they didn't think that others could join in. Yeah. So now they thought, okay, maybe a Jew can get saved. Yeah. Which is really hilarious because it's come full circle. Yeah. So I think the confusion so that's kind of what's happening now, the trend of people embracing the Jewish roots or the Hebraic roots. Different people say it different ways. But I think that people need to embrace how they are, who they are. And if they're a Gentile, now if they find out there's some kind of background, grandmother was Jewish or great grandmother, something like that, that's very interesting. But don't I'd say don't pursue that to the point where you lose your identity and you become what we call mishugas, crazy, a crazy person. There's so many wannabe Jews out there. And the fact there's so many Messianic congregations that are predominantly probably upper 90% or more that are filled with Gentile Christians, I think that's a testimony of how God is bringing the concept of the Jewishness of the faith. I celebrate it. I think it's an awesome thing, but I think that those people also need to just be honest and realize, okay, we're not trying to take away the identity from the Jewish people. We want to celebrate it and bless them, and there should be a reciprocation in reverse, because Romans 11 says that the gospel went to the nations, went to the Gentiles, so that at some point in history, it'll find its way back to Israel. And I believe that's what we're starting to see now.
Yeah. Well, I think that was part of the whole thing of the Israel nation becoming a nation again, was so that that fulfillment could come.
Yes.
That there would be,
that's a good point.
Because it was a coming back to. And so there had to be that physical location, which there's so much more than that, but there's aspects.
Yeah. I mean, we're a both and kind of people, in our ministry. My wife, we have a ministry called Yeshua Israel. My in-laws have a ministry called Ma'oz Israel. They've been in the land for many, many years, more than 40 years.
By the way, if you're not familiar with that ministry, me and my wife have been partners with Ma'oz for, I think, 7 or 8 years at least. Awesome. That we've been partnering. They're doing some great stuff helping people. So look that up.
And you also you've been partnering with Yeshua Israel. Quite as long, but you guys have been awesome and great help for us too. And so what our concept, and I think this is representative of all believers and leaders in the land of Israel, that we realize that the Lord brought us back to the land in 1948, which is a fulfillment of prophecy. I mean, there's just no other way to see it, He says in the book of Ezekiel in chapter 36 that I will bring you back into the land. And here's a simple concept. You read the whole chapter. There in the land, I will save you. Salvation being Yeshua. This is the name for our Hebrew name for Jesus. So this is, it's such a simple plan, but people tend to, you ever been around families that you just said, man, like there has to be drama added somehow. It's like, can't you guys just get along? Yeah. There's no point for the drama. I mean, everybody just knock it off and get along. It's just, okay, who cares, which cup is whose or whatever. Sometimes with 5 kids, I have to do the same thing. I'm like, why so much drama, And so I feel like the Gentile church and the church over centuries and centuries has created so much drama for no reason. It's just, okay, so we're Gentiles. The Lord loves us. He has a plan for us. These Jewish people were the firstborn. And they're chosen, but they're not chosen because they're better. The Lord actually says in Deuteronomy, I chose you because you're the weakest of all the nations. I needed to show that I could give strength through these people, because the Lord can be great and mighty through a weak group of people and show his strength to them, then he's truly God. Yeah. He's truly the Almighty. If he can take a group of people that are kind of nothing in and of themselves and do all the great things that we know Jewish people and the nation of Israel has done over the centuries, the breakthroughs in technology, all the advancements and all the hammering on the walls, and all the, they invented, the Jews invented the hammer, right? The Maccabees, anyway. But you've got this great blessing, like you said, started from Abraham. This continued on to this day, and those people are the natural seed of Abraham.
Mm-hmm. I am the root of Jesse. I am the God of Jerusalem, wherein is my name.